Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull, and it's time for my day 11 of spring practice thoughts. Number one, with the injuries that we heard from the insiders, outside of the normal ones, we're hearing that Joshua Josephs had a hamstring deal and he was limited today. Hopefully, there's nothing serious with that. Don't know if he's going to be participating in the orange and white game. If he's got a hamstring deal, it's probably best for him not to, okay? Like, you just don't want to tweak that anymore. Go on ahead and rest up and let's get ready for summer ball. And we also heard that Braylon Staley may not have practiced today. Now, I say may not have because the insiders kind of went back and forth on it. They didn't know if they maybe missed him out there today or if he just really was not out there. So that's going to be huge. Obviously, if it's an injury or if it's a multitude of different things, it may not have been anything to do with him physically. Maybe he had some, off the field stuff going on. Who knows? Hopefully everything is okay with him because he's going to be a guy for us this season at that slot position right there with Squirrel White. And we also heard that Nathan Leacock is back running around out there with the team. That's really big because we want to be able to retain him on this roster coming up, after the spring. If we can hold on to him, then I think that we're in a really great spot just as far as that wide receiver room. Obviously, it's already very deep, but I love Nathan Leacock, and he kind of had a tough spring last year. And, he didn't get to play that much, okay, in the regular season, but he's got a whole lot of potential, okay? 6'3", about 215, 220 pounds. Reminds me a whole lot of a Brew McCoy. So we need to make sure that we can hold on to Nathan. It's just good to hear that he's back out running around, and we'll keep a very close eye out on what's going on with him. Also sounds like Peyton Lewis was back out running around with the team. That's huge because at the running back position, we've got Cam Seldon is probably going to miss about half of the season. And Peyton Lewis is going to have to step up in a very major way, along with everyone else inside of that running backs room. Will we go to the transfer portal or not? We'll touch on that a little bit more as we get into the running backs in this video. And we're also hearing that Arion Carter is just looking great as far as running around. Now, he's non-contact still, no pads are on, but it sounds like he's very anxious to learn and very, anxious to be able to keep his spot because we do think he's going to end up being the starter right there next to Keenan Pili. Now on to what we got to listen to from the coach, William Inge, and the players after practice, right? And we heard from Jason Jenkins, we heard from Jeremiah Thielander, Keenan Pili, David Hobbs, and Caleb Perry. So starting off, okay, with the linebackers and Coach William Inge, sounds like he was, very impressed with his room. He talks a lot about teaching and cross-training from the Mike position at linebacker to the Will position. And the players just kind of echoed those sentiments of, hey, man, we feel very comfortable being able to do either one. And they love his style of teaching. And, I just think that it's big to have a coach that understands the game the way that Coach Inge does. And, he also talked about Jeremiah Thielander. So I believe that he spoke about him first. And he said, man, JT is a guy that has that calm. And, I've heard in the Juice episode, he's just kind of talking to the linebacker room about staying calm. And I think that's one of the biggest things for these athletes, because whenever you get into these big critical moments, right? Like if it's a, like game determining play, then you want to be able to keep your heart rate down. You want to stay calm and you want to make sure that you're executing at the highest level. So I think that it's huge that Coach Inge is teaching that to this team, but also hearing that Jeremiah Thielander, as a second-year player, has already gotten that. And, he just sounds like he's very, very comfortable in the system. And I feel like him and Coach Inge are pretty close. And Coach Inge also just kind of spoke about some of the other linebackers with Keenan Pili, being the veteran in that group. And he's saying, man, look, he should be one of the best linebackers in this entire country. And that's what they are working towards. So that's big because on this channel, that's what we've been saying too. Like, look, Keenan Pili should end up being probably, one of the top 3 or 4 linebackers in the entire country. And I definitely think that he will be, barring any sort of an injury, knock on wood. But so that was really good to hear. Coach Inge also said that he feels like Caleb Perry reminds him the most of himself off the field. That's pretty cool to hear. Okay, Caleb Perry is a guy that I was very hard on this past season or, last season. And hopefully he will be able to take those steps forward. Coach Inge talked about Arion Carter and Herring, being guys that are frequently, showing up to the meetings early, right? At 6 a.m. They're there trying to see what the schedule is for the day and just trying to learn as much as possible. And that's gigantic because if you're not playing physically, you do want to be able to grow from a mental perspective, getting in those mental reps, just doing those little extra things. And that goes a very long way with the coaching staff. So I'm just very impressed with everything that I've been hearing so far. Oh, and of course, I cannot forget about Edwin Spillman. Coach Inge said, listen, Edwin Spillman is a guy that we don't got to say sick him, right? Like we got to try to pull him off. We talked about that in almost every single video with spring practice so far. That's really big. And he also said that he's going to be a player that everyone's going to know about come 5 months, which would be about the time that the season starts. Some people don't think that it means that he's going to be playing a whole lot at linebacker, but I do. I just think that even hearing some of the other players talking about him, just his mental work that he's already put in as a true freshman. He came in off the bus, ready to play, just a few short weeks ago, and he is approaching the game like a veteran. And he's a very intelligent young man. And I think that he's going to get a big opportunity to play a lot. Anytime that a linebacker is playing downhill on a consistent basis, I mean, that's what you want to see. As long as he can get that playbook right, which again, I believe that he will. So all that is really good to hear. And as far as the linebackers work out there today at practice, it sounds like they were doing some zone coverage things and, working on not false stepping, which basically means that you take an unnecessary step as soon as the ball is snapped. And you don't want to do that, okay? Like literally, I don't think anywhere on the football field on this level can you afford to have those false steps. We saw a whole lot of that last season from the linebacker group. But again, it's really big to hear that Coach Inge is teaching those little small details to make us a much better team. And I just think that as a unit, okay, we're really, really deep. Everyone's very happy with that room. And, I would definitely expect for us to jump leaps and bounds from where we were last season by the time that, we kick off coming up here in September. Now, on to the defensive line. We got to hear from Jason Jenkins and David Hobbs. And it sounds like Jason Jenkins is a guy that a lot of people, okay, have been praising. Okay, Coach G's talked a lot about him. We heard James Pierce talk about him, and he feels very comfortable in his role. He talks about, having to grind for everything that he's gotten coming out of high school. Didn't have any offers as a senior, and he's got to a really good point. And that's just very impressive. I don't know exactly where he fits in as far as the depth chart goes. Again, that room is just so deep that it's going to be hard to tell, but there's not going to be any drop off. That's something that we know, okay? And he's going to be like a strong side DN type. I think he could also maybe play tackle for you, especially in that Rabbits package, something like that. He's just a bigger body guy with a whole lot of burst off of the football, and I'm excited to see what he does out here on this scrimmage coming up on Saturday. David Hobbs also just spoke about the way that he's transformed his body, and you can tell he looks really good. He's got to be about 6'5", 6'6", maybe 295-ish pounds. Prototype for that 3 technique, which he said he's primarily focusing on at this point, but he can also play at the end position as well. So he's a guy to for sure keep a very close eye out on. I think that he's looked great in practice so far. I mean, just a great burst, just great length. And I mean, you love that competition inside of that room and throughout the entire team. It just seems to kind of be carrying over. And there's a whole lot of buzz with that room. And it sounds like they all know it. They all keep talking about it like, man, yeah, we should be 3-4 deep. And, we should be one of the best rooms in the entire country. So just having that type of confidence, I feel like heading into the season, kind of coming out of spring is just critical. Now, something that I really want to touch on here with this defensive line, and I had kind of pointed out in the practice film from earlier today, is that it looks like Emmanuel Okoye has finally made the move from tight end to defensive end. And we kind of said it coming out of high school, right? Like before he got up on campus, we said, okay, we see him more as a defensive end prospect. Well, he ended up, getting moved to tight end. And we understood that just because we were so shorthanded in that room at that point. But with him being such a new player to football, we said it's going to be tough for him to figure it out. And I was just kind of questioning as to why we were doing it. But now I get it. I think that this was a very genius move. Whenever you start off playing football from a younger age, you usually are playing offense and defense. So if you're trying to learn the game, the best way to do it would be to kind of play both. But starting off on offense will give you a better understanding of what an offense does and what football is. I just feel like there's so much more to learn. So I think that he got about a year, maybe about like a year and a half worth of a crash course, on what it is to play football. So now he understands it at a much higher level. The staff does a great job of going out and getting more tight ends. So now we don't necessarily need him there. And he's working over at the defensive end spot, which is a much more natural position for him, understanding what football is, on a much higher level at this point. So I think that he can end up being a guy. Now, I could be off on this. That might not have been Mr. Okoye in number 98, but if you look at it, he was number 27 on offense, and we all know that James Pierce is number 27 on defense. And if he's going to make that transition, right, then he would have to switch his number. There is no other 98 on our defense. I think that it's him. It looks like him at about 6'6". He looks even taller than that. It looks like he might be about 6'7", probably somewhere around 235, 240 pounds. And I'm going to take y'all back about a year ago whenever we were targeting Emmanuel Okoye, and he's blowing that combine deal that he had coming from London out of the water. A lot of his numbers would have been like the best in the NFL combine for defensive end prospects that year. So I think that just speaks to his how good of an athlete he's going to be, how explosive he is with long arms. And he's going to learn how to continue to have that higher motor and, just keep on pressing after that quarterback, especially with Coach G. The amount of knowledge that I'm sure he's gained up to this point is going to put him at a really, really good position. I think that he's going to end up playing over there at the Leo, which would be behind James Pierce. And there's a lot of other guys because we don't have Jordan Ross on campus just yet. We talked about Joshua Joseph earlier today with the hamstring injury being out. He's another really good one. We still got Shandavian Bradley. I mean, we're loaded, but he's a guy that I think is literally, as far as an athlete, he could end up being like 1A and 1B with, I believe, Jordan Ross. I think that those are going to end up being our two most athletic pass rushers. And I know some of y'all are probably thinking, well, what about James Pierce? James Pierce is a really good athlete, but James Pierce is also a little bit further along. He's like a junior or something like that this season. So I think that his ceiling isn't as high as Emmanuel Okoye's or Jordan Ross's. So maybe that was a better way for me to say it. I think that those two players might have the highest ceiling as a pass rusher from an athletic perspective. A whole lot to look forward to right there. And I also just want to briefly talk about listening to Omar Norman Lott talking on Vol Club Confidential with Austin Price. I love his whole story. He talks about coming from Arizona State. First off, he talks about coming from California, the way that he grew up, and, he grew up in a tough place. And, then he goes on to talk about getting his offer from Arizona State and going up there and kind of losing his love for the game. And, just for those of y'all who don't know, he's the only player that we've done a film breakdown on that got a 2-star rating. And we talked about it. We said, man, listen, you can tell that he's got all the right skill sets, but he just didn't show that love and that passion for the game. So it's big to hear him say that, man, look, I just had lost my passion, gets that change of scenery. And just like we figured could end up happening with Coach G, I mean, he's turned into one of the best 3 techniques in the entire country. And I think that he's going to have a big time breakout year. He had 5.5 sacks last season, but he also just talks about being at Arizona State and, having to be a bouncer and things like that. And I mean, I think that it was just a great episode, but coming away from it, I just love him. You know what I mean? He's one of my favorite players on this team. And I think that y'all would really enjoy that episode. So if you haven't, go and check it out. That might be the best one yet. So yeah, that room, again, just from top to bottom, is loaded with a whole lot of dogs. Sounds like they, kind of are pushing one another. Actually, Omar Norman Lott talked about James Pierce being a guy that would kind of get on him once he first got there. And, he said that it turned into like a friendly competition. And I love to hear that. So we're looking really good as far as the front seven. On defense, let's go ahead and talk about the secondary. Now, we haven't heard anything from them today, but we did see them out there working and doing some, like zone coverage type stuff. Sounds like there was a lot more teaching in today's practice amongst all of the position groups. So that's always good to see, right? Like we're kind of getting deeper into it just as far as learning more and more. Like we're installing more and more, which is going to be really big for these younger players. And I was impressed with what I saw from a young guy like Boo Carter out there. It looks like he's picking things up very quickly. I still think that he could end up being maybe number 2 at the star position. We also heard that the cornerbacks were doing a lot of tackling. It sounds like Jermod McCoy and Jalen McMurray were very impressive in those drills. That's really good to hear. Can Jalen McMurray end up being a guy that maybe could push Ricky Gibson to start? I don't know, because I still think that Ricky Gibson might be the better player in coverage, but you want to hear that, the 2 guys that we are expecting to start are both looking good in the physical part of the game. It's just so important playing corner, playing in the secondary, playing anywhere on this entire team, okay? We need for players to be very physical. So that's interesting. It also sounds like, just in hearing from some of the insiders talk, that maybe Jordan Matthews is getting passed up a little bit by Christian Conyers at the cornerback position. I don't know how true that is, but if that is the case, we have to keep a very close eye out on Jordan Matthews to potentially enter that transfer portal. He's just got to continue to get better and better. And I think that all of these players do as well, obviously. But I love that room. Okay. From top to bottom, we always talk about Kobe Thomas, Jordan Thomas, Andre Turrentine, Christian Harrison. Okay. He looked really good just in a few little clips that we got to see today. So I love it, man. I'm so excited about the defense as a whole. And I know that some people still doubt it, but this is going to be one of the best defenses that Tennessee has had in a long, long time. You're going to have to go back to that former era to see a defense that will be as dominant as this one should be, at least on paper and from what we've been seeing so far in, just like little fundamental work. But now on over to offense. Let's start off with the offensive line, okay? I like what I saw from them. I saw some combo blocking out there, all right? Sounds like there was a whole lot of teaching going on there as well. And, that's what it's all about, right? Obviously, with all those young guys out there playing, you want for them to continue to get that crash course. We've talked about how that room is kind of taking a page out of, Coach Garner's room from the past few seasons where, hey, let's get these young guys out there. Let's keep the veterans healthy and let's get these young guys in so that we can build up that depth. And I think that we're doing a very, very good job of that. I'm just impressed with the way that the players are carrying themselves out there. You can tell that there's a lot of focus, and you can tell that just the hand placement, just like the footwork, body control, all that, it's really, really good. So we'll see what happens at the left guard position. I still think it's probably going to end up being Shamrod Umarov starting right there with a guy like Jackson Lampley missing so much time. I think that he would have benefited a lot to have been able to come in and get some more reps at the left guard spot. But we still have a long time left in the offseason. We'll see who ends up winning that battle. But I'm starting to feel more and more comfortable, with that position as we're getting closer to kickoff. Now on to the running backs room. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, Peyton Lewis being out there running around. That's really, really big. And I've heard, okay, from the insiders that they don't believe that we'll be going into the transfer portal to get another running back, after spring. And I don't know how true that is, okay, but obviously I'm going to trust what they say. They're a lot closer to the program than I am. And that's a great thing because what that means is the staff trusts what they have out there. And, obviously Coach Sims being new to this whole deal, I still trust him. You know what I mean? I think that him, he's kind of got like a blank canvas, so to speak. He's seeing all these players as far as what they're doing right now. We haven't got to see everyone go a lot so far. So that's good. It means that what he has seen out of the players that are still participating, they're doing a really good job. So we'll keep a close eye out on that. Sounds like Deshaun Bishop has been very, very impressive so far. I've seen a couple of clips too of Keith just going to work, just in some blocking drills. I think that it was one where he was blocking Jeremiah Lander, and he looked like he kind of shocked him. So that's a really big deal for him to be a true freshman and doing that to a guy that we know is an absolute dog in Jeremiah Lander. Now, I wouldn't say that Keith won that rep. I would say it was more of a stalemate, but that's what you want to see, okay? That's something to keep in mind as we are getting closer and closer to our orange and white game, is that you don't want to necessarily see a whole lot of wins and losses. You want to see very, very close competition. You want to see some stalemates. You want to see players getting after it. But for sure, everyone's going to have their eye on that running backs room. Now on to the wide receivers. Sounds like Chris Brazzell has been, very, very impressive. It sounds like he had his best day of all of spring so far. So coming in, getting that crash course, being fed from a water hose, okay, like everyone always talks about. It sounds like it's tough, right? Especially with the tempo and all those types of things. But just the simple fact that Chris Brazzell has gotten more acclimated to the system up to this point, and he's being more consistent is really, really big. I still think that Caleb Webb looks really good. We heard that Chaz Nimrod has been moved over to the slot position. So that group gets deeper, and it does, as we kind of talked about, was Braylon Staley out today. If Chaz Nimrod is working over there at slot, it kind of leads me to believe that maybe Braylon Staley was out. But it's cool to see a guy that was one of our outside threats, maybe one of our most consistent playmakers last season at wide receiver, can be versatile enough to move into the slot. So, we can go big there, we can go really fast there. And it's just great to see how versatile this team can be. I'm going to be very interested to see, what do the formations look like? Do we go more 4 wide? Will we see some 5 wide? Like what are the combinations going to be as far as the players out there? I feel like we can switch that up on a week-to-week basis based off of who we're going to be playing up against, on that Saturday. So that's really big news. And finally, on to the quarterbacks, because we didn't hear anything at all about the tight ends. But on to the quarterbacks, right? It sounds like Nico also had his best day of all of spring. They looked really sharp. They looked really crisp, very much midseason-esque. And this is pretty much a game week. That's what you want to see. Just guys being dialed in and being focused. And obviously, Nico is the absolute and total truth. I think he's going to win the Heisman this season, okay? Not too concerned about that quarterback room by any means. Gastamora also looks great. I think that Jake Merklinger, for a true freshman, has been very, very impressive. But we'll get to see a lot of, those latter two once we get into the orange and white game. And I know that y'all can't wait for it. We can't wait for it either. But that's going to be it for today's video. Thank y'all so much for sticking all the way to the end. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. And we'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.